In whole years, Sub-Saharan Africa has given football legends whose names are celebrated in every corner of the globe. George Weah became the first and, so far, only African player to win the prestigious Ballon d'Or. Samuel Eto'o conquered Europe with his remarkable goal-scoring ability, winning multiple UEFA Champions League titles. Didier Drogba transformed not only football in Ivory Coast but also became a symbol of national unity during one of his country's darkest periods. JJ Okocha mesmerized fans with extraordinary skill and creativity, while Yaya Touré dominated English football as one of the finest midfielders of his generation. The list continues almost endlessly where Michael Essien, Nwankwo Kanu, Sadio Mane, Victor Osimhen, Kalidou Koulibaly, Andre Onana, Thomas Partey, and countless others have become stars in Europe's most demanding leagues. Week after week, African players have lifted league titles, domestic cups, continental trophies, and individual awards. They have worn the shirts of the world's biggest clubs, earned the admiration of millions, and proven beyond any doubt that talent has never been Africa's problem. Yet every 4 years, when the FIFA World Cup begins, the same question returns. Why has Sub-Saharan Africa, despite producing so many extraordinary footballers, never produced a FIFA World Cup champion? It is one of the greatest paradoxes in modern sport. For more than half a century, Sub-Saharan African nations have carried the hopes of an entire region onto football's biggest stage. They have thrilled the world with fearless performances. They have defeated former world champions. They have stunned tournament favorites. They have produced unforgettable moments that remain part of World Cup history. And yet, when the tournament reaches its decisive final stages, Sub-Saharan African teams have always fallen short. Let's see some came painfully close. In 1990, Cameroon became the first African team to reach a World Cup quarter-final, capturing the imagination of the football world with fearless performances that challenged long-held assumptions about African football. 20 years later, Ghana stood within touching distance of becoming the continent's first semi-finalist before one of the most dramatic moments in World Cup history ended its dream. Senegal announced itself spectacularly in 2002 by defeating reigning champions France in the opening match before marching to the quarter-finals. Also, Nigeria repeatedly assembled squads overflowing with talent but struggled to convert potential into sustained success. Ivory Coast produced one of Africa's finest generations of players yet found themselves trapped in extraordinarily difficult groups. South Africa carried the hopes of an entire continent as hosts in 2010 but became the first host nation ever eliminated in the group stage. Smaller nations such as Angola and Togo reached the tournament against the odds, only to discover how enormous the gap remained between qualification and genuine title contention. These stories are not merely about football matches. They are stories of politics, economics, history, leadership, planning, and opportunity. Unlike club football, where elite players train together every day under stable management with vast financial resources, international football reflects the strength of an entire football ecosystem. Winning the World Cup demands much more than gifted individuals. It requires visionary leadership, consistent coaching, world-class youth development, modern infrastructure, advanced sports science, financial stability, effective governance, and long-term strategic planning that can endure for decades. This is where the conversation becomes more complicated. For years, many observers explained Africa's World Cup struggles through stereotypes. Some claimed African teams lacked discipline. Others argued they were tactically naive or emotionally fragile under pressure. Such explanations have become increasingly difficult to defend. Today's sub-Saharan African footballers compete every week in Europe's most tactically sophisticated leagues. They are coached by some of the finest managers in the world. They understand complex tactical systems, maintain exceptional physical standards, and regularly outperform players from countries that have won the World Cup. If these same players can succeed with Europe's biggest clubs, why does that success often fail to translate into the international arena? The answer lies far beyond the 90 minutes played on the pitch. It begins years before a player wears the national jersey. It begins in youth academies where children either receive quality coaching or are left to develop without structured guidance. It continues through domestic leagues that either prepare players for elite competition or struggle under financial and organizational limitations. It is shaped by national federations that make decisions affecting coaching appointments, player welfare, tournament preparation, and long-term development. It depends on governments that choose whether or not to invest in sporting infrastructure. It is influenced by political stability, economic conditions, education systems, medical support, sports science, talent identification, and countless other factors that rarely attract headlines but ultimately determine whether a nation can compete with the world's best. The FIFA World Cup is not simply a tournament to identify the most talented players. It is the ultimate examination of a country's football system. History repeatedly demonstrates this truth. Nations that have lifted the World Cup, Brazil, Germany, Italy, Argentina, France, Spain, England, and Uruguay, did not rely solely on brilliant individuals. They built structures capable of producing excellence generation after generation. Their triumphs reflected decades of investment, planning, coaching education, institutional stability, and football culture extending from grassroots programs to elite professional environments. This documentary explores every sub-Saharan African nation that has competed on football's greatest stage. It examines their greatest triumphs, their most painful disappointments, and the deeper structural challenges that have shaped their journeys. Rather than searching for a single explanation, it follows decades of history to understand why some of the world's finest footballers have not yet carried a sub-Saharan African nation to the pinnacle of international football. First, the DR Congo national football team, then known as Zaire, made history by becoming the first sub-Saharan African nation to qualify for the 1974 FIFA World Cup after winning the 1974 Africa Cup of Nations. Their qualification was celebrated across Africa as a breakthrough for a continent that had long struggled for recognition in world football. However, the tournament proved extremely difficult, as Zaire lost all 3 matches, including a record 9-0 defeat to Yugoslavia, before finishing with a loss to Brazil. Although these results damaged Africa's reputation at the time, they did not reflect a lack of talent. The team was affected by poor preparation, unpaid bonuses, political interference under Mobutu Sese Seko, and limited experience against elite international opponents. Despite the disappointing campaign, Zaire inspired future generations by proving that a sub-Saharan African nation could reach the World Cup. Also, the Cameroon national football team became the first African team to reach the World Cup quarter-finals at the 1990 FIFA World Cup, famously defeating defending champions Argentina before narrowly losing to England in extra time. Led by the legendary Roger Milla, Cameroon proved that African teams could compete with the world's best. They later qualified for several more World Cups and produced stars such as Samuel Eto'o and Rigobert Song, but never matched their 1990 achievement. Administrative instability, frequent coaching changes, and inconsistent long-term planning have repeatedly limited their progress. This journey shows that while talent can produce historic moments, winning the World Cup requires stable football structures as much as exceptional players. The next was the Nigeria national football team. It had been qualified for the FIFA World Cup 6 times since making its debut in 1994. Nigeria impressed the world by reaching the round of 16 in 1994, 1998, and 2014, producing legendary players such as J.J. Okocha, Nwankwo Kanu, John Obi Mikel, and Victor Osimhen. Despite its rich talent and strong football culture, Nigeria has never progressed beyond the round of 16. Poor administration, frequent coaching changes, financial disputes, and inconsistent planning have often prevented the Super Eagles from fulfilling their enormous potential. Nigeria's history proves that even one of Africa's most gifted teams cannot become a World Cup champion without stable leadership, effective management, and long-term football development. The next nation is the South Africa national football team. It had been made its FIFA World Cup debut in 1998 and qualified again in 2002 before hosting the historic 2010 FIFA World Cup, the first World Cup ever held on African soil. Although they earned memorable victories, South Africa has never advanced beyond the group stage, becoming the first host nation to be eliminated in the opening round in 2010. The country has produced talented players, but inconsistent performances, coaching instability, and a domestic league that has struggled to consistently develop world-class talent have limited its progress. While South Africa possesses some of Africa's best football infrastructure, turning that advantage into sustained international success remains one of its biggest challenges. Let's now talk about Senegal. The Senegal national football team announced themselves on the world stage at the 2002 FIFA World Cup by defeating defending champions France in the opening match before reaching the quarter-finals, becoming only the second African team to achieve that feat. Senegal also qualified for the 2018 and 2022 World Cups, producing world-class players such as Sadio Mane, Kalidou Koulibaly, and Edouard Mendy. Known for their discipline, organization, and physical strength, Senegal has become one of Africa's most consistent teams. However, injuries to key players, limited squad depth, and the difficulty of maintaining elite performances throughout the tournament have prevented them from progressing beyond the quarter-finals. Now let's see the Ivory Coast. The Ivory Coast national football team qualified for 3 consecutive FIFA World Cups in 2006, 2010, and 2014, entering each tournament with one of the most talented squads in Africa. Featuring world-class players such as Didier Drogba, Yaya Touré, and Kolo Touré, the team was widely expected to become Africa's first serious contender for the World Cup title. However, despite their talent, Ivory Coast failed to progress beyond the group stage in all 3 tournaments. Difficult group draws, defensive instability, and over-reliance on individual brilliance limited their success. The team often struggled to translate their dominance in African football into consistent results on the world stage. Their story highlights a recurring pattern in sub-Saharan African football: having elite players is not enough without tactical balance, depth, and strong collective organization. Finally, let me talk on Ghana national football team. It has been one of Africa's most competitive sides at the World Cup, qualifying in 2006, 2010, and 2014, and reaching the round of 16 in 2006 and the quarterfinals in 2010. Their most iconic campaign came in 2010 at the 2010 FIFA World Cup, where Ghana came within a penalty kick of becoming the first African team to reach a World Cup semi-final, only to be eliminated by Uruguay in one of the tournament's most dramatic moments. The team produced outstanding talents such as Michael Essien, Asamoah Gyan, and Thomas Partey. Despite their strong performances, Ghana's progress has been limited by inconsistent administration, internal federation disputes, and moments of psychological collapse under pressure in critical matches. Their story is perhaps the clearest example of how close sub-Saharan Africa has come to a World Cup breakthrough, yet also how small margins and structural weaknesses have repeatedly stopped that dream from becoming reality. By reflecting on current 2026 World Cup qualification cycle, sub-Saharan African teams such as Ivory Coast, Cape Verde, South Africa, DR Congo national football team, Ghana national football team, and Senegal national football team have continued to show strong individual talent but also familiar inconsistencies in crucial matches. While some teams remain competitive and capable of qualification, none has yet demonstrated the complete stability, depth, and consistency required to be considered a realistic World Cup champion. The pattern from previous tournaments is still visible: moments of brilliance are not yet matched by long-term structural dominance on the world stage. Now, according to you, tell us what those sub-Saharan national teams can do to perform well and win the next World Cup in 2030. Share with us in comments section.